I wanted to start a new teaching series. I'm calling it One Nation Under God question mark. It's going to be a look at the rather complicated relationship between church and state. So tonight's conversation is going to focus on the question, is America a Christian nation? Okay, my first point is that America does not have a covenant relationship with God the same way that Israel did. I don't believe that the founding fathers were attempting to create a theocracy in the technical sense, the way that Israel was a theocracy. And a theocracy is a type of government where God is the king. Our country is covenantally no different than any other country. So this tweet, America is no more special to God than Africa, Ecuador, Scotland, or Belgium. Let's stop pretending that America is God's favorite child. And I think that there is some truth in this tweet from a covenantal perspective. Now, are we as God's people, as his children, as his family, as his household, special to the Father? Absolutely. But he doesn't have a covenant relationship with our country the same way that he had with Israel. So that's my first point. Number two, God expects all nations to follow general principles of his standards of justice. And if they don't, judgment will happen. When Noah and his family got off the ark in Genesis chapter 9, God restated the commands that he had given to Adam to multiply and fill the earth. This is called the Noahic covenant. It is the covenant that God made with Noah. Sometimes this passage in Genesis chapter 9 is also referred to by Jewish scholars as the covenant of the Gentiles. God raises up nations and he judges nations. And if you break, in particular, this Noahic covenant, this covenant with the Gentiles, if you engage in these gross practices, these detestable practices, God will judge nations. Our third point tonight is that America has flourished as a result of several values that are rooted in Scripture. But we are living in a cultural moment when we seem to be transitioning from one set of cultural values that are commonly shared by the majority of people, and we are transitioning to a different set of cultural values. So values that we took for granted, I think, are quickly disappearing. And perhaps, though, through that process, I think what could happen, one possibility, is that it will be more clear to us how our country's founding principles are actually hooked to Scripture. Because as things go away, we're going to start thinking, hey, wait a minute, what happened to this value and this idea? I think that some of those things are going, as they go away, we might have more appreciation for, oh, wait, we valued this because it was actually founded on the Christian worldview. I mean, the very idea that humans have equal value, dignity, and worth. This is just an idea that we take for granted. But this had not always been the common thought. Prior to capitalism, or what we might look at as even the founding of America, the way people amassed great wealth was by looting, plundering, and enslaving their fellow man. Capitalism made it possible to become wealthy by serving your fellow man. And this idea that the individual could serve their community through business and the rise of Adam Smith and the ideals of capitalism were commensurate with the rise of the ideals of our country. And so these things were looked upon as being sister movements. This is all rooted and grounded in the idea of the individual having dignity, value, and worth. Where did our country's founding fathers get such a crazy idea? In Genesis 1, in the Bible, Genesis 1 says this, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, that they may rule over the earth. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. These two simple verses serve as the foundation for what we today call human rights. And these are a key cornerstone of what we call the Judeo-Christian worldview. Because it is based on scripture and not fallible humans, it had more depth than the sinful hearts of the human framers. I mean, many of them did not fully grasp that this dignity extended to slaves or the indigenous people or to women. But our country has been able to pursue a more consistent application of this grand ideal. Why? Because this grand ideal wasn't birthed in the minds of these founding fathers, as brilliant as they were. It was birthed in scripture, and they just discovered it and then applied that to the enterprise of the public square. So my first point was that all humans have equal value and dignity. My second point is that all humans are sinful. The founding fathers understood that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. They understood this conviction that at man's foundational base, he was sinful. This conviction led them to avoid utopian experiments, such as those that were later pursued with the French Revolution. And I would say communism is another utopian experiment. And they adopted a constitutional system that was characterized by a separation of powers, checks and balances, and federalism. In other words, not a centralized federal government, but a state-heavy government. So things like 3 branches of government, separation of powers, checks and balances, these were a result that stemmed out of a theological belief. Okay, the third amazing feature of our government is equality under the law. Individuals, no matter their station in life, were to be judged according to the same standards under the law. The idea that a poor person and a rich person should both have representation, have the same type of trial, and they should be able to get their evidence impartially weighed. This is why the symbol of justice is blindfolded. Justice is to be blind. There is a type of impartiality that is supposed to be part of our justice system. These ideals that stand at the center of our law and justice system are rooted and grounded in scripture, and they're rooted and grounded in principles that our founding fathers, many of them gleaned from the Old Testament, and things that I've been talking about on my podcast for the last few months. Our fourth critical idea is the idea of individual freedom. Our country is one that was founded on the ideal of the individual. And if we look for a minute at the First Amendment of the Constitution, it's what we call the Bill of Rights. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble or to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Again, we take this for granted, but this was a revolutionary idea. The founding fathers believed that because humans were created in the image of God, they were capable of reason and logic. And because of this, individuals should have the right to congregate, to hear ideas, to convert religions, to deconvert from a religion, to be an atheist, to speak out against the government, to wave a flag and support the government. What we're seeing today is a changing of that sentiment. Now ideas are dangerous. And if you don't have the idea that the culture says is correct, you can be canceled. Free speech is no longer valued. Rather, correct speech is what's allowed. And in order to be correct, it must reflect the moral values of social justice and critical theories, definitions of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it's no coincidence what we're seeing today, that these pillars of individual human dignity, equality under the law, free speech, that humans are sinful, these are the very pillars that are being strategically targeted by neo-Marxists. And they have been that way since the 1930s. It's just a fact of history. The difference now is that enough headway has been made in the academic realm that we are seeing now, what we are witnessing in our broad culture, the popular culture, is the trickle-down effect to the common person. Let's go back to our original question. Is America a Christian nation? Well, I would say no, it is not. If you are meaning by that, you're asking the question, does America have a special covenant relationship with God the way that Israel did? No, America does not have that. But if you're asking me whether America was founded on principles, general broad principles of moral good that were founded in the Judeo-Christian worldview, I would say yes. In that sense, in that context, some broad features of the Christian worldview provided an important intellectual influence in our country's founding fathers. Without Christianity, we would live in a very different world.